I actually can't believe more people aren't playing this commander. Marvo Deep Operative is a brand new commander that came out in the Revenant Recon Precon. Say that 5 times fast. And with all of the frequent product releases that Wizards of the Coast has really been doing over the past couple of years, I think that this commander just sort of went to the wayside. It really didn't have its time in the sun, so to speak. And I'm very surprised that more people aren't playing it. And I feel like it's sort of common practice for us as commander players to slowly gravitate toward more niche card choices. Because if you cast your 500th counterspell and ruin somebody's day the 500th time in a row, it gets a little bit old. But when you cast like an atypical counter spell, or it's something that people don't all the time see, it gets a little bit more interesting for the whole table. You know, Orvar, for instance, when Orvar came out, it made twiddle effects fantastic. And I think Marvo does that in a very powerful way with clashing effects. Clash is an older mechanic from Lorwyn, whereupon you and an opponent reveal the top card of your library. And then whoever has the higher, at the time it was CMC, but now it's mana value. Whoever has the higher mana value of spell or permanent that's on top of the library wins the clash, and then they can choose to put it on the top or the bottom of their library. You get that card selection for both players. Now, I mean, this is sweet for a ton of different reasons, one of which is my favorite. It makes an older mechanic really cool again. So Clash is something I've always been interested in, and quite frankly, I've actually tried out a lot of Clash cards. One of them was actually in one of my recent blue videos talking about cool blue cards, and you can go check that out once you're done with this video. And I just love the ability to take a card as old in the Lorwyn set and just make it applicable, and not only applicable, but powerful in a new way. Number 2, Marvo's second ability allows you to immediately play that card that you clashed with or another card in your hand for free. And of course, there's the caveat that it has to be a mana value of 8 or less, but let's be real with ourselves. That's a very, very generous restriction to have in place. There are so many powerful effects that we can cast for under 8 mana, and we're going to go into a lot of those in today's video. My spicy picks, my budget picks, all that stuff. 3, and I have a little story for you on this one. It involves the entire table. So I was playing with my Thursday group. I was testing out my little octopus friend here. And in doing so, I started to realize that everybody was sort of like, as the clashing was about to happen, everybody's just reaching for their deck. Even if I haven't selected anybody, even if I haven't looked at anybody, I just see everybody's hands gravitating toward their deck. They're excited to do the clash. And I think there's a few reasons for that. Reason number 1 that I've been able to calculate is that people want to just beat you. They want to be the one that stops you in your little warpath. And although that's less likely because we're going to build the deck in a way that it makes it so we're going to win, people are still very excited to do so. And when they win the clash against you, they feel really good. And honestly, it's no skin off my back, because generally in a situation like that, I'm already in a good position, or I've clashed multiple times in a turn, whatever. So I don't mind if I lose the clash, and everybody feels great when they get the chance to do so. And the second reason is that I think players just love the card selection. So if you choose somebody, especially somebody who's been a bit mana screwed or needs a little bit more of assistance with their build path or whatever, you can actually choose to select them and be a little bit more buddy-buddy with them, because they get to choose if that card stays on top or goes on the bottom. And I can't tell you how many times people were putting cards on the bottom of their library because they wanted to be able to choose. They wanted the selection to throw that card on the bottom. And sometimes they even thanked me for it, because they would have totally bricked their turn otherwise. It just promotes a more dynamic table, I think. My 4th reason for why Clash is so good, and also this commander, is that it's actually very straightforward for newer players. So my fiance, who's much newer than I am, she picked up the deck, played it, and immediately loved it. She understood the mission. She knew what the deck was doing. Not only is Marvo sort of the engine for you, but you have plenty of value pieces in this deck and things to sort of escalate to your eventual game plan of playing big cards. And that's what we love to do in this format. We love to play big cards. And another thing, a part of my Thursday group, there's a new player who's only played a couple of times, very new to the game, and he watched me play this deck, and he only needed to watch me clash one time, and then immediately his brain, I could see the gears turning as he sort of understood the power of this mechanic and also understood how it functioned. And now he's actually looking to make his own version of the Marvo deck with his own unique includes, because he loved the mechanic, he loved how it involved the table, and that's just an exciting place to be with other people that are just as excited as you are that you're playing this deck. And the 5th thing, the last thing that I'm so excited about, is that this commander really allows you to sort of build in paths that you typically could not otherwise. And it's because you can cheat out certain cards that tend to not get played because the casting cost is so extreme. And we're going to go into that. You can play a 10-cent, uncommon that is like an 8-drop or something. And you can make it viable in this deck simply because Marvo allows you to cheat the cost. So if that 8-drop really maybe isn't as valuable as other 8-drops in the format, let's say it's more akin to like a 6 or 7 mana slot, but it's all the way up at 8, Marvo says, I don't care, cast it for free. And so this allows you to use some of your bulk or some of your, less common pieces that you may not otherwise get a chance to see, the light of day, and put it into a deck that can actually utilize it. That's pretty cool. And what's more, you can play cards like this one. So this is Worst Fears. We're going to talk about this, but this card allows you just to control somebody else's turn. It's 8 mana. And Marvo says, cast me for free. And when you play cards like this, the entire table is losing their mind because they are either so pumped that, you're about to take over somebody else's turn, like the power player, or everybody is just dreading it. They're just all huddled back. They're trying to be as little as possible because they don't want to be selected. And, cards like this, it requires you to have a good group and to know them. But I've also played this out in the wild with other people, and like, the laughter that happens as a result of this, because it's so swingy, is hilarious. And I probably wouldn't really play this card in many other places. So without further ado, let's just sort of walk through. This is going to be more of like a casual video style. I have the cards literally right in front of me for this deck. I've played it, like I said, numerous times at this point, and other people have also piloted this deck and given me their feedback. And we're just going to kind of walk through what makes this deck tick. So first and foremost, as you can see here, are the Clash cards, and I'll try to put them up in their own little thing on screen now so you can see them better. But cards like Revive the Fallen, Broken Ambitions, Scattering Stroke, Pulling Teeth, etc. These are all cards either from the Lorwyn block or from, I forget the name of this set, but I'll see if I can put that up on screen too. And these cards honestly are pretty awful. They're really not good by themselves, but they get so much better when Marvo is out on the battlefield. And this is what I'm talking about. These cards that will just never, get a chance to be seen at the table. Now, all of a sudden, you can play them and feel really good about playing them. You can play a janky card just to be sort of edgy or different, or because you're sick of playing like the old classics, so to speak. But how many times do you get to play Pulling Teeth? You know what I mean? It's a sorcery for 2 mana, 1 and a black. You clash with an opponent, and then if you win, target player discards 2 cards. Otherwise, that player discards a single card. And I love using this card on my friends that are just giving me a hard time at the table or that have stifled me. I'll say something to the effect of like, man, this entire game has been like pulling teeth. And then, you play the Pulling Teeth card and everybody laughs. And, under that same banner, I was talking about counter spells earlier. Let's talk about Scattering Stroke. So Scattering Stroke is 4 mana, 2 blue for an instant. You counter target spell. So you get the counter no matter what, but here's the next part. You clash with an opponent. If you win, at the beginning of your next main phase, you can add X to your mana pool, where X is the spell's converted mana cost. This card goes hard in Marvo because you are effectively mana draining somebody and you're getting the value if Marvo is out. So I tend to try to have some setup turns where I have Marvo and this guy in my hand, and then I'm able to sort of harvest the maximum value from this. And is it greedy? Oh yeah, it's greedy. But when you're playing a budget deck and you just need to hit one of your crazy beaters off the top, it sort of falls in place. It only needs a few dominoes to collapse for the remainder of that entire domino maze that you've made to just totally overwhelm your opponents. And I think that we should sort of move on from the Clash cards, because you could play some of the worst ones, but take a look at my deck list and the archedeck down below. I think I've included sort of the best of the bunch for you to play in your Marvo deck. But let's move on to some of the more fun cards. Actually, let's talk about the card that made me want to do this in the first place. So here it is. In the Ravnica Remastered set, they actually reprinted this little guy. It is Mind Leech Mass. And Mind Leech Mass is an 8 mana Dimir horror. It has trample. It's a 6/6. And then whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you may look at that player's hand. And if you do, you may cast a spell from among those cards without paying its mana cost. So Immediately I'm intrigued because this card has trample, so I just need to get 1 damage in, and then I can basically look at somebody's hand. I basically thought seize them, but it's worse because I get to play any of those cards without paying their mana cost. So if I know somebody is playing like the big Naya dinosaur deck, and you know who you are, I'm going to hit you with this as long as I can get this out early enough. And most of the time I can. And even if you're playing something like Ala Palani, where I have to trample over an egg or something, it's sort of like a mutually beneficial situation where you get something and I get something. Or, the other scenario is you can disrupt a combo player with something like this. And this is, to me, a like more fair version of thought seize, I guess. Like, people hate having their hand thought seized or duressed in Commander. Like, we want to just sort of play the cards in our hand and not have too much, interaction with our hands and decks per se. If something gets countered, it is what it is. But this card had me so hyped, and I've played it multiple times now. And to be fair, people try to remove this as fast as possible. The other thing to point out here is because I have included so many like big beater creatures in here like this one that is a threat, you tend to have to use this card selection of like, I have a Swords to Plowshares in my hand. I could target the octopus yielding a knife, but that Mind Leech Mass, if it hits me, I am totally screwed. So I have to get rid of it. And that's a bad position to be in as a player, but it's a great position for you who's piloting this deck to be in, because you all of a sudden have axed your Mind Leech Mass. He's gone, but you still have your Marvo out on the battlefield, and you get to clash again on the next turn, hopefully, because they've used their single target removal on something other than Marvo. And that is just so sweet. That's happened to me so many times now. So don't underestimate the power of including the creatures in your deck. I would encourage you to actually give it a try instead of just playing extra turn spells, because everybody falls asleep at the table as soon as you start taking extra turns. But when you play a Mind Leech Mass, everybody is high alert and ready to react. And that is always fun for me as a player. So I was deconstructing my Necron deck that I got. It's the Precon with the Necrons in it. And this card, Shard of the Nightbringer, came up for me. And it's not a artifact creature. And I was building an artifact creature heavy deck, mono black artifact creatures. And this card was just left over in the pile. And this is an 8 mana, by the way, 8/8 with flying. And then whenever this card, Shard of the Nightbringer, enters the battlefield, if you cast it, target opponent loses half of their life rounded up, and you gain life equal to the life lost this way. So here's the thing. With this clash mechanic, Marvo reads, whenever you win a clash, you draw. Then you may cast a spell from your hand with mana value 8 or less without paying its mana cost. So you are in fact casting a card. So you can cast Shard of the Nightbringer for free if you draw it off the top, and then you just have somebody's life total, and then you get that life. And cards like this, and then I also included right next to it, Torgar Infinite Incarnate. It's basically the same thing, but you can also cheat it out if you wanted to, if you somehow have tokens or whatever, if you've stolen things from people. And then when it enters the battlefield, that one doesn't even have to be cast. Up to one target player's life total becomes half of their starting life total, rounded down. And that may not seem as good, and it's not. However, Torgar has really pulled a lot of weight for me because it's a cheap card to cast in the event that you need to sacrifice creatures to get around paying its mana cost. And most of the time, I don't think I've had a single situation where I've had this card and then it's been bad. Because here's the thing, you can also target yourself in the event that you want to gain life. And I've done that one time and it's actually saved me the game. So you have the flexibility to either target yourself or target other players, but keep in mind, it's going to bring somebody's life total to 20. So moving forward, I think that Torgar is going to be an include for me, and I would encourage you to give it a try too. So let's talk about Auton Soldier. So this is one of the most expensive cards that I have in this deck. Auton Soldier is a 6 mana artifact creature that says you may have it enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature, except it isn't legendary, is an artifact in addition to its other types, and has Myriad. And Myriad makes a token copy of itself that swings at the other players. Here's where it gets really insane. So Auton Soldier has basically turned into sort of a quasi-win condition for me, because if you have Marvo out, you can then play Auton Soldier, even if it's just the next turn, and get a copy of Marvo. And it's pretty sweet because now we have 2 Marvos, and then whenever this one attacks, you clash with a player. Now here's the thing, Myriad makes an attacking token. So you don't get to trigger Marvo's clash ability with Auton Soldier, but you do get the token copies until end of combat that see you winning a clash, because you can stack the ability on attack so that the Myriad trigger will resolve first. You get the token copies of your Marvo, and then if you have both of these on the battlefield attacking, you get to clash twice. So let's just play out this scenario where you have an Auton Soldier and Marvo on the battlefield already, and they're attacking. So you're going to get 2 more copies of Marvo attacking. So now we have 4 Marvos on the battlefield at the same time, and you're going to clash twice. Let's say you win a clash. All 4 of the Marvos on the battlefield will see you winning said clash, allowing you to draw a card. And then because of sequencing, we have to resolve the ability to play a spell or permanent with mana value 8 or less from your hand. So what ends up happening is you have 2 attacking, you make 2 token copies that are attacking the other players, but we only have 2 clash triggers. We resolve the first clash trigger first, and if we win, all 4 of the Marvos see it, draw us 4 cards, and then we get to cast 4 things from our hand with permanent or spell mana value 8 or less. This card has won me games by itself, basically. Even if Marvo is gone, all of a sudden, as I mentioned, everybody is going to be looking at either of these and going, well, I have to remove both. So we either need to board wipe and set myself back, or I need to choose which one to get rid of. It's always the right choice to choose Auton Soldier, by the way. But it's just incredible. The value that you harness from this lets you churn through your deck, draw a ton of cards, and as long as you sequence everything correctly, really allows you to just abuse what other people are, or really allows you to abuse what you are trying to do with this deck. So even if you're trying to build on a budget, I think Auton Soldier has just been such an overperformer for me that you really probably should consider including it in your list. Give it a try. All right, let's talk about another synergistic piece with the deck that is extremely budget now. It's like 30 or 40 cents or whatever, and that card is Doom Whisperer. So Doom Whisperer used to be expensive. It was like a $5 to like $7 card, but it went all the way down to like 50 cents or less with the recent release of actually this deck with Marvo in it, by the way. And this is just a 6/6 for 5 mana, flying trampler. It's already good, already has good keywords. And then it has pay 2 life to surveil 2. So surveil 2, you look at the top 2, you can put any of them into your graveyard and the rest go back on top of your library in any order. So let's say that you have a Marvo trigger on the stack to clash with an opponent. That means that as it goes on the stack, we have to pass priority around first in order to determine if it resolves, the ability that is. And so then you get to surveil 2. You get to activate an ability at instant speed. You pay 2 life and surveil 2, and you get to select what goes on top of your library. This card wins games. Let me just be fully transparent, because if you can stack the ability to just pay 2 life and surveil as much as you want, you can stack whatever you want on top of your library. And if you have this and an Auton Soldier out, guess what? You just simply get the best cards on top of your library. You can pay effectively any amount of life up until death that you want, because when you play some of these cards out of here for free, the game immediately swings in your direction, and there's very, very little your opponents can do to stop you. But that's enough gushing about that. Let's talk about some cards that are just killers by themselves, that are cards that once they're played, they have a major impact on the game. Those are some synergy pieces and some cool ways to sort of end the game. Let's talk about sort of the bread and butter of our deck. So how about we start with one that was just reprinted again in Ravnica Remastered? Yet another card that made me want to do this, and that's Lord of the Void. So Lord of the Void is a 7 mana 7/7 demon with flying, and then whenever it deals damage to a player, combat damage, exile the top 7 of that player's library, then put a creature from among them onto the battlefield under your control. It's just really cool. I mean, I'm not running extra combats in this deck, even though I probably could find a way to do that, likely extra turn spells, right? But this card is just really neat. And the reprint brought the price down massively. I think it's like around $4 now, which is still out of budget for some people, and I understand that. But Lord of the Void has just been a really cool include, and nobody wants it to stick on the table. Yet again, just another threat that people have to remove. And speaking of a threat, let's talk about a little friend, Jin-Gitaxias Progress Tyrant. This card is just gross. So whenever you, meaning me, casts an artifact, instant, or sorcery, I get to copy it, and then I can choose new targets for the copy. This triggers once per turn. So essentially, you have to do this on the first cast because it's only going to trigger one time. However, whenever an opponent has another ability, whenever an opponent casts an artifact, instant, or sorcery, you counter it, and that triggers once per turn. So if you get this out and it has yet to trigger, you're going to have protection built into your board at instant speed, or where people can't play things at instant speed to disrupt your plan because it's going to get countered. And for you, you just get gravy. Let me tell you, having this card out on the battlefield, even by itself, and then casting a Worst Fears where you take over somebody's turn, oh boy, are people salty. When you can take over two people's turns, you effectively time walk two players. The game basically crumbles and ends. This card is great, and I built this deck in a more control-heavy manner, and this card, I would say it's not absolutely necessary, but it really helps your game plan, and you're always happy to see this on your side of the board. Man, let's talk about an old favorite of mine, and that is Elder Brain. You guys know how much I love this card, specifically this art that you see here. I'll see if I can get it in focus, something like that. But Elder Brain is a 7-mana 6/6 with Menace, by the way. And then whenever it attacks, it doesn't even have to deal damage. You get to exile all cards from that player's hand, and then they draw that many. And then you may play lands and cast spells from among the exiled cards for as long as they remain exiled, and use mana as though it were mana of any type. Elder Brain is just hilarious. Everybody's always scared of this card when it's attacking. And to be honest with you, a big part of me just loves it because of the art. Like, it's so sweet. This buy a box promo version of it with like all the floating like Illithid or whatever they are in the background is just awesome. And when I was running a D&D campaign, this is exactly sort of how I imagined the Elder Brain. I was very, very excited to see this printing of it. Another favorite of mine, and unfortunately it's been going up in price because people are starting to realize how ridiculous this card is Astral Dragon. So Astral Dragon is 8 mana, so you cast it for free. It's a dragon, of course, 4/4 flying, but when it ETBs, you get to create 2 tokens, 2, that are copies of target non-creature permanent, except they're dragons in addition to their other type and have flying. So let me copy your Rhystic Study. Let me copy your Smothering Tithe. Let me copy your Ghostly Prison or your Propaganda. I can go on and on about how this card basically slows the game to a halt for your opponents because all of a sudden you're taxing them and abusing what your opponents have been trying to do to you the entire time anyway. And that's what feels great about it because this is a budget deck. So I'm not running Rhystic Study in this deck. I don't even think I have a Mystic Remora in here. So being able to steal away other people's copies of that has been hilarious for me and just so good when you cast it for free. I mean, casting any 8 mana spell for free arguably is good, but especially Astral Dragon, it just gets you so much value. And then last on this list of creatures, I believe it's last. Yeah, it is Myojin of Cryptic Dreams. Now, this is another 8 mana card. And initially, I didn't include it. I thought about not including it, but I did, and it's been great. So when it enters the battlefield with an indestructible counter on it, if you've cast it from your hand, by the way, we're casting it from our hand, and then on top of that, you can remove an indestructible counter from it to copy target permanent spell. So while it's on the stack, 3 times. 3. So for instance, I have tons of permanent spells like the Astral Dragon, Elder Brain, everything that we just went over. You can copy it 3 times. If you copy a Shard of the Nightbringer 3 times, you just gain like 60 life and you have everybody's life totals down to like 20 or less or whatever. And on top of that, you could do something like Astral Dragon and just make 6 non-creature copies of a permanent on the battlefield your opponents control. It's so good. It's so good. This card, I think, is really underrated for what it does. I don't really see it in a lot of lists, and I've never actually had anyone ever play it against me, but everybody's always impressed when I get to use it and play it. So highly recommend this guy. Give this little Djinn a try. And now for the divine comedy that is Worst Fears and Cruel Entertainment. So these 2 cards, man. Hilarious. I'm doing a video. This is a little sneak peek. I'm doing a video of best black cards, and these are in there. Worst Fears and Cruel Entertainment. Let's review Worst Fears first because everybody already kind of knows it. I've reviewed it already earlier in the video. It's an 8 mana sorcery that allows you to control target player during that next player's turn. Exile Worst Fears. So even if you get to only control one player's turn, it's good. And there's many of our clash spells that are at instant speed that allow you to sort of hope to get something like this, or Cruel Entertainment. We'll talk about that too. Worst Fears is amazing. I can't talk highly enough about it. Again, it's sort of like one of those dynamic cards at the table where everybody is turning their heads. They're like, what does that card do? I've never seen that card before. Let me take a look at that. I need to add it to my collection so I can play that card. That's one of those cards. So definitely don't skimp on this. And let's talk about Cruel Entertainment too. So Cruel Entertainment is a 7 mana sorcery. And whenever you choose target player and another target player, the first player controls the second during that second player's next turn, and the second player controls the first player during that first player's next turn. Confusing. Basically, you're swapping control of players. My fiance actually used this card, and she swapped her turn with another player's turn who was the combo player, and she totally bricked the combo player's turn so they wouldn't win. She went on to win that game, by the way. So you can target yourself with this if you want, like she did, or you can target 2 other people and have them sort of fight it out if they've been enemies the whole time. And this is another one of those cards that just has everybody turning their heads at the table wondering what it is. All right, so we're in the home stretch here, and I need to make a PSA. So I don't understand why people don't play these in like almost every blue deck that they have the chance to play them in. And that would be Treasure Cruise and Dig Through Time. So both with a delve cost. So Treasure Cruise oftentimes is literally just Ancestral Recall. I mean, do I need to even say anymore? Like, it smooths out your game. It allows you to take advantage of your graveyard being full in the same way that Dig Through Time does. And Dig Through Time, arguably in some ways, is almost better because it gives you the card selection of the top 7. Now, I'm not going to sit here and like pit these two against each other or anything like that, but please play these, especially in Marvo. It's like, I think Treasure Cruise is like 10 cents or 15 cents, and Dig Through Time, you don't need the fancy foiled version like this, which by the way is only like 30 or 40 cents. Just throwing that out there, just putting it out there. You can also buy like the regular standard version for 10 cents. So 20 cents gets you an Ancestral Recall and something that sometimes is better than an Ancestral Recall in this deck. So play them. Take advantage of how cheap these amazing cards are and incorporate them in your budget deck. Now, something that's not so budget, I included it because I opened it myself in a pack, and that would be a Sensei's Divining Top. I got the fancy, whatever this is, foil etch version or whatever, if you can see it. And everybody knows Sensei's Divining Top. I think even if you're a new player, you've seen it on game nights or somewhere else. It basically allows you to select whatever is on top of your library, and then you can also tap it to draw a card, and then this will go back on top of your library. It protects itself. It gives you card selection. It's really good. The reason I included it is because I was only at like $100 with this deck, and I was like, you know what? Like $100 is a really good number to be at, but I want to make this deck really sort of lethal. I want to make sure that I'm getting to the cards that I need time and time again. I might as well include one expensive card in the deck, and that's Sensei's Divining Top. And I haven't been, upset at including it, but I also could have kept it out, honestly. Like, the deck is just good by itself. You don't need this. You could actually just put in, I don't know, another mana rock, or you could put in something else to help manipulate the top of your library that's a lot cheaper, like a different opt or something like that. You don't need a Sensei's Divining Top to make this deck good. Let me be very clear about that. This deck functions very well by itself, and you don't need the additional disruption like this or the selection like this. And to be fair, if you wanted to build it in a way that it's more random, I think that's fun too, but it's more fun to play your cool stuff out of your deck. So, pick and choose your battles. If you have an extra Divining Top lying around, put it in. You will be satisfied. If you don't have it, you will not miss it. So sort of under a similar vein, actually it's this card that I'm thinking of. I just had this lying around. I opened it in a pack a while back. It's a Personal Tutor. Personal Tutor was almost budget friendly for a little while there. It was down to $2 or something like that. And it's because it's a sorcery speed card, right? And you can only get a sorcery card with it. But you know what in our deck is a sorcery? Yeah, Cruel Entertainment and Worst Fears. So you know what I'm trying to search out. And there's a couple others. We're gonna get to them here in a second. This Personal Tutor is $4, I want to say now, maybe $5. And I have been satisfied with it every time I've used it because it's just setup. And you don't want to use this card just proactively. You want to use this card in a way that's going to set up a win for you. That's the key. So if you have Marvo out and everybody's tapped out on mana, play this, put something cool on top, and then you're basically guaranteed a win on the clash unless somebody else is playing a heavy CMC deck, which you wouldn't select them anyway, by the way. And then you get to win the clash and play your really powerful spell. It's been really good. It's relatively budget friendly. You know, everybody always asks me, like, what's your real definition of budget? I get that all the time. I don't really have one. It's like I try my best just to sort of think about, like, personal tutor to me being $4 for this powerful of an effect really is sort of a budgetary option. I mean, $4 is not terrible, really. But, you know, Sensei's Divining Top, I mean, like, that's an hour's worth of your life spent at a job or something, right? Like, it's an expensive card. The only reason I have it really is because I opened it in a pack a while ago, a long while ago. But Personal Tutor, I would encourage you to give it a shot. Even if you just proxy it in, give it a try. And I've been really also interested in cards that have come out recently that have sort of been swept under the rug. And one of them is Protection Racket. So this card was included in one of it was the Streets of, what's it called? New Capenna. I want to say Barry Manilow, Streets of New Capenna. And 3 mana at the beginning of your upkeep, repeat the following process for each opponent in turn order. You reveal the top card of your library. That player may pay life equal to the card's mana value. If they do, exile it. Otherwise, put it into your hand. Guys, this card is crazy in this deck. I have tons of 8 and 7 mana things. So all around the table, people are like, I guess I just pay 8 life because I don't want you to have that in your hand. When in reality, I actually don't want it in my hand anyway. I would prefer it to be on top. So really, they're sort of self-selecting for me. Don't tell my friends this, but most of the time, I'm A-okay with them just exiling the card because they're just going to take a ton of damage and they're sort of unnecessarily afraid. I'm sorry if you can hear my dogs in the background, but we are nearing the end of this video, so let's power through. So let's talk about one final sorcery that I really want to highlight, and that's Breach the Multiverse. You know, when this came out, part of me was like, I should buy 50 of these because it's such a good effect. And at the time, I think it was like a dollar or like 50 cents or something when the set first released. I'm like, this card's going to be really good. And I'm regretting that I didn't do that because for each player, they mill 10. Then for each player, choose a creature or planeswalker in that graveyard. It doesn't have to be from the milled cards, by the way. Put those cards onto the battlefield under your control. Then each creature you control becomes a Phyrexian in addition to its other types. We don't play it for the Phyrexian part. We play it for the absolute blowout that this card normally causes. If you're playing against people that have big beater creatures, you're going to love this card. Anything that revolves around you sort of, you know, requiring your graveyard in the first place, you're going to want to play this card because you're already going to have a filled yard with really big threats anyway. So even if it's just sort of a quasi reanimation spell, you're doing good. But the upside is that it's a reanimation spell for everybody. And on top of that, most of the time you're playing this card for free because you're going to clash it off the top, win, and then play it for free. It's so good, so good. And then we've been talking a lot about being on top today. So let's talk about one with the multiverse, which is excellent for that. So it's an 8-mana enchantment, another one you can cast for free. I've thought this through, right? And you may look at the top card of your library anytime. That's very helpful by itself, but also you may play lands and cast spells from the top of your library. That is so good. I can't even fathom it in this deck. That is such a great effect because you can take lands off the top and then look again. Maybe that card is a clash card that you want, especially in a budget format where one with a multiverse, I can buy a copy of this on TCG right now for like $250. That's budget in my eyes for this powerful of effect already. But then it goes on because, you know, why wouldn't it? Once during each of your turns, you may cast a spell from your hand or the top of your library without paying its mana cost. So let's say that, you know, you've already done your clash thing, you filtered through, and unfortunately you haven't really hit anything. Main phase 2, baby. Here it is. You get to cast something for free off the top or in your hand. So you can use it as a setup piece for Marvo or proactively if you've missed and you're able to sort of get to something later because you've been filtering through with the card selection that Clash allows you to. One with a multiverse is just fantastic. I would not play this deck without it, if I'm being fully transparent. And then lastly, I just want to throw this out there. Amanatu's Augury, this is a proxied version, by the way, because for some reason I don't have a copy of this. It just arrived in the mail, I think. Exile the top 8 of your library, and you can put a land from among them onto the battlefield. And until the end of turn, for each non-land card type, so non-land card type, instant, sorcery, creature, artifact, etc., you may cast a spell of that type from among the exiled cards without paying their mana cost. God almighty, is this card good in this deck. Every time I've played it, it's been disgusting. Absolutely gross, because there's a high chance you're going to hit one of your clash spells, like maybe a Revive the Fallen where you clash again. Cast it for free. Get something else for free off the top with Marvo. Or maybe you hit something else like one of the other permanent spells that we've talked about today. And if you have a dual type, let's say you have an artifact creature you're casting, you get to designate which type you are casting. So Amanatu's Augury, stellar card. I would definitely recommend including it, especially for like 30 or 40 cents. And then finally, you're probably going to get mad at me, but it's Hullbreaker Horror. Yeah, I know it's an annoying card to play against. It is, but we have to win somehow. And this deck really is sort of more grindy, and it wants you to sort of control the board and punish your opponents for things. And this is just too good, I think, not to include, especially it's 7 mana. If you want to buy this card, it's just a couple bucks, for the powerful effect that it offers. You can also save it in your hand and flash it in at a later time. That way it's more protected when it gets back around to your turn. There's so much flexibility with this guy. And I know, like I said, people will get angry when this hits the table, but you have to end the game somehow. And if ending the game for you means you're going to cast all of these cards for free off the top with Marvo and then just bounce everything back to other people's hands, or instant speed, allowing you to just return spells to people's hands, that's a win condition. It shuts the game down. It locks it down for you to then play your big beaters and then get in and crack in for the win. I wouldn't include a Hullbreaker Horror unless I had sort of like a clear designated idea in mind for why I'm including it, because it's expensive. It's 7 mana. So play it with caution, I would say, because people get very salty when that card hits the battlefield. Everybody, my friends included. So use a little bit of caution and use your best judgment when you're building the deck. But I find that it's a reasonable choice. And I think that, if you got to win, you got to win. Don't just do it. And that's the video. If you're interested in more cards that are a bit atypical that you don't normally see in other places, go ahead and check out my other video. I don't know if it's going to be up here or over there. I'll see if I can add a card, or just look on my channel for the blue card video, the one that are less played. That goes over like 30 cards or something crazy, where, you can get some really high value off of lesser played blue spells. And the black video is coming soon. POV, some of the cards that are in this deck are going to be in that video, and you don't want to miss it. So subscribe to the channel if you want to be alerted whenever that video comes out. What's more, I hope that this video gave you a little bit of value and perspective into sort of my deck building and why I made the decisions that I did for this deck. And if it interests you and you want to see more like it, give the video a like to show your support, so that way I know to continue making more videos just like this one. But that's it. There's nothing else to be said. I've been Kyle. I'll see you guys in the next video. And as always, support my addiction so I can support your addiction. See you in the next one. Bye.